The reception hall was alive with laughter and hushed murmurs as the impeccably dressed guests turned their attention to the groom. Standing at the altar, he stood out, not for his elegance, but for the simplicity of his well-worn suit, tailored to fit just so. The whispers were unavoidable. How can someone so ordinary dare to marry into such a distinguished family? Yet his eyes remained fixed on the bride, shimmering with a mix of nerves and pure, unshakable love. When he took hold of the microphone to speak, the room fell silent. And then, in a steady voice, he began, "Today, I need to share something I've never had the courage to say." From a young age, Miguel had understood that life was built on effort and sacrifice. Born in a small village, he was the eldest of 5 siblings, helping his father tend to leased farmland while his mother spent long nights sewing to make ends meet. He believed true love was a reward for humility and perseverance. So when he met Beatriz, a young woman with a sweet smile and a generous heart, he felt fate had given him the greatest gift of all. Beatriz was everything Miguel was not, the daughter of an influential family, accustomed to a life of luxury and ease. But what drew them together was something money could never buy: authenticity. From their very first meeting, she saw in Miguel a man of integrity, with an unwavering determination and a kindness that made him give even the little he had to help others. Their love, however, wasn't met with the same warmth by Beatriz's family. Her father, a pompous and controlling businessman, had sneered the moment he met Miguel. "What do you do for a living, young man?" he asked, disdain dripping from his tone. Miguel answered honestly, "I'm a mechanic, sir. I work in a garage to fund my engineering studies." The response was met with stifled chuckles from the relatives gathered around. To them, he was nothing more than a humble laborer, far beneath their beloved daughter. The weeks that followed were a true test of character for Miguel. Each visit to her family's home brought with it judgmental glances and veiled remarks. "He's only after your money, my dear," her mother would say. "You deserve someone who can give you the world, not a future full of hardship." But Beatriz stood her ground. "Miguel gives me something no amount of money could ever buy: love and respect," she'd reply, though her voice often drowned under the relentless pressure. Meanwhile, Miguel battled his own insecurities. He knew he'd never be enough in their eyes. Many times, he wondered if he was being selfish by holding on to Beatriz, if letting her go was the real act of love. But she refused to leave. "Life isn't about status or wealth, Miguel. It's about choosing who we want by our side," she'd remind him. As the wedding day approached, Miguel was determined to prove his worth, not to impress her family, but to show Beatriz that she hadn't made the wrong choice. He worked tirelessly, putting in extra hours at the garage while quietly planning a way to make the day unforgettable for her. But the night before the wedding, he received a blow that nearly broke him. Beatriz's father called. "I hope you realize tomorrow is nothing but a farce. You'll never be part of our family. Everyone will be there to laugh at you. Don't think there's anything you can say that'll change our minds." Miguel hung up the phone in silence. His mind swirled with anger, humiliation, and doubt. Was he about to condemn Beatriz to a life of scorn? For a fleeting moment, he thought of not showing up the next day. Perhaps letting her go was the ultimate proof of his love. But as he stared out of his small apartment window, his eyes fell on a photo of them together, taken on their first anniversary. The joy in Beatriz's smile was answer enough. He couldn't give up. They had come too far to let anyone else's doubts win. The morning of the wedding arrived, and Miguel stood at the altar carrying more than nerves. He carried the weight of every judgmental glance and condescending remark he'd endured up to that moment. As Beatriz's father passed him in the aisle, he smirked coldly and whispered, let's see if you can say anything to change our minds." But something inside Miguel had shifted. As he looked at Beatrice walking towards him, her eyes shining with love and certainty, he found the strength he needed. And when it was his turn to speak, his voice didn't falter. "Today, I need to share something I've never had the courage to say." He took a deep breath, his eyes sweeping across the room. All attention was on him, some gazes curious, others dripping with disdain. The silence was almost deafening. "When I met Beatrice, I fell in love not with her status, but with the person she is. I know many of you think I'm not worthy of standing by her side, and maybe you're right. But I've learned that worth isn't measured by how much money you have, but by how you treat the people you love. Beatrice taught me that. She gave me the courage to be a better man, to dream bigger." He paused, his voice steadying, growing firmer. "And to those who doubt me, let me say this, I'm not here to prove anything. I'm here because I love her. And together, we'll build something no one in this room can give us, a future based on respect, love, and perseverance." The words hung in the air. Some guests seemed moved, others maintained their stern expressions. Beatrice's father crossed his arms, lips tight. Then, unexpectedly, one of her uncles began to clap. Slowly, others joined in, until the hall was filled with applause. Miguel turned to Beatrice, who had tears in her eyes, and knew he'd done the right thing. Miguel couldn't pinpoint the exact moment he stopped believing in fairy tales. Maybe it was the day he realized his father's relentless hard work would never lift them out of poverty, or the first time someone looked down on him like he didn't matter. He grew up grounded, certain that big dreams were for other people, those born with privileges he couldn't even fathom. Beatrice, on the other hand, was raised surrounded by stories of perfect love. Her mother loved recounting how her father had wooed her with serenades and jewels, insisting that successful men always knew how to treat a woman. Yet in practice, Beatrice had never seen true love in her father's eyes, only an unyielding rigidity and a coldness that chilled even his most affectionate gestures. Meeting Miguel was like a jolt of reality for her. He wasn't perfect, and that was exactly what drew her in. He cared more about solving problems than showing off, and the light in his eyes when he spoke of the future was something she'd never seen in anyone else. He was intense, genuine, and above all, respectful. "You make me feel seen, Miguel," she once told him, after a long conversation beneath the shade of a park tree. "I've spent my whole life surrounded by people, but I never felt truly heard, until now." Their relationship grew slowly, like a flower pushing its way through cracks in the pavement, defying all odds. The first time Miguel brought Beatrice to his home, he felt a mix of pride and embarrassment. His small rented flat was nothing compared to the luxury she was used to. But Beatrice didn't seem to mind. In fact, she was charmed by the simple details, like the plants he nurtured in repurposed tins. "You turn the little you have into something beautiful," she said with a smile, gently touching one of the leaves. Still, the gulf between their worlds was a constant shadow. When they went out together, Miguel couldn't ignore the judging glances of people who recognized Beatrice. There was always that blend of curiosity and mockery, as though they were trying to decode what someone so refined saw in someone so ordinary. But Beatrice seemed immune to it all. She walked hand in hand with him, head held high, silently telling the world she didn't care what they thought. The hardest moments, however, were the silent ones after yet another argument with her parents. Miguel knew, no matter how much Beatrice tried to hide it, that those fights took a toll on her. After one particularly heated night, he found her crying in her car outside his workshop. "You don't have to go through this because of me," he said quietly. "I love you, but I don't want to be the reason for your tears." Beatrice wiped her eyes and grasped his hand tightly. "Miguel, I'm not crying because of you. I'm crying because they can't see what I see. You're not a hurdle in my life, you're the reason I finally want to fight for something." Her words became a turning point for Miguel. If Beatrice was willing to fight for him, he'd do the same for her. He began saving for a ring, knowing full well her father would likely scoff at its simplicity. But Miguel wasn't trying to impress anyone else, he simply wanted to show Beatrice she was at the heart of his world. When Miguel finally proposed, it was during a quiet, unassuming walk along the beach. They strolled barefoot on the sand, the sound of waves filling the comfortable silence between them. Miguel suddenly stopped, pulling a small silver ring from his pocket. There were no candles, no music, no crowd to cheer, but Beatrice couldn't have been happier. "I don't have much to offer," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "But everything I am, I want to give to you. Will you build a life with me, even if it won't be one of luxury?" Beatrice laughed through her tears and replied firmly, "The only luxury I want is you. That's all that matters." She slipped the ring onto her finger, and the sparkle in her eyes made the moment more magical than any grand celebration could have been. From that point on, the challenges only grew. Beatrice's father, Armando, seemed hell-bent on proving Miguel was unworthy of her. He threatened to cut off her financial support, and without hesitation, Beatrice accepted. "I can live without his money, Miguel, but I can't live without you." Those words echoed in his mind for weeks, filling him with both pride and guilt. He knew her decision came with consequences, and it only strengthened his resolve to become the man she already believed he was. Planning the wedding was a mix of joy and tension. Miguel insisted on paying for most of it, even if it meant putting in grueling hours at the garage. He wanted the day to celebrate their love, not to be a battleground between him and her parents. Still, the negative comments trickled in, like thorns that refused to be ignored. Family friends whispered that he'd never be able to give Beatrice the life she deserved. And while Beatrice always defended him, Miguel knew those words stung her deeply. "You don't have to fight so hard, Miguel," she said one evening as they gazed at the city lights from a hilltop. "I'm already on your side. I always will be. It's not for them, Beatrice. It's for you. You deserve the world, and if I can't give it to you now, I'll build it with my own hands." Beatrice smiled, pulling him into a hug. "The world I want is already here," she whispered. Not long after committing to a lifetime together, Beatrice surprised Miguel with a bold idea, a trip to a luxurious inn in Campos do Jordão. "It's my treat for us," she said, holding his hands. "You work so hard, Miguel. I want you to relax, even if just for a few days." Miguel hesitated. He had never left his hometown, and the world of luxury seemed as distant as the moon. But Beatrice's enthusiasm was contagious, and he didn't want to disappoint her. "If it means being with you, I'll go," he replied, trying to mask his nerves. The trip started well. On the long drive to the inn, Beatrice filled the car with Miguel's favorite songs, and the two laughed and sang as they always did. But his unease began the moment they arrived at the inn's ornate gates. The grand architecture, imported cars in the parking lot, and impeccably dressed staff made Miguel feel entirely out of place. Still, he took a deep breath and held Beatrice's hand tightly. "Let's do this," he said, forcing a smile. At reception, while Beatrice handled check-in, Miguel noticed the glances from other guests. Men in suits and women in elegant dresses looked at him as if he were an odd piece of furniture in an otherwise pristine room. He overheard one of the staff muttering quietly, though not quietly enough, they a couple? Strange. Miguel tried to ignore it, but the discomfort lingered. At dinner in the inn's refined restaurant, he struggled to decipher the menu written in French. Beatrice tried to help, but when he finally placed his order, the waiter smirked condescendingly. "Ah, monsieur chooses the simplest dish?" "Of course." Miguel flushed but maintained his composure, determined not to ruin Beatrice's evening. The worst moment, however, came the next day during an activity organized by the hotel. Beatrice had convinced him to join her for a horseback ride, something Miguel had never done before. At the stables, a group of guests was already gathered, including a man named Renato, who quickly made himself noticeable with the way he looked at Beatrice. Renato was tall, polished, and exuded an effortless charm that made Miguel feel even more out of place. He greeted Beatrice warmly, his smile lingering a little too long. "Beatrice," he said, as though savoring her name. "I didn't expect to see you here." "And who's this?" he added, with a glance that was polite but edged with something Miguel couldn't quite place. "This is Miguel," Beatrice said, her voice steady but her grip tightening on Miguel's hand. "My fiancé." Renato raised an eyebrow, his smile unwavering. "Ah, lucky man." He turned to Miguel. "I hope you're ready for this. Riding isn't as easy as it looks." Miguel forced a smile, feeling a knot tighten in his chest. As the group mounted their horses, Renato made it a point to ride close to Beatrice, striking up a conversation as though Miguel wasn't even there. Every laugh from Beatrice, though innocent, felt like a dagger to Miguel's pride. He gritted his teeth, determined to get through the ride without making a scene. But as the trail wound its way through the hills, Miguel's inexperience became apparent. His horse was restless, sensing his nerves, and he struggled to keep up with the group. At one point, the horse veered off the trail slightly, and Miguel heard a soft chuckle from Renato. "Need a hand, mate?" he called out, his tone more mocking than helpful. Miguel clenched his jaw, his face hot with embarrassment. Beatrice immediately pulled her horse back to ride beside him, ignoring Renato completely. "You're doing great," she said softly, her eyes filled with encouragement. In that moment, Miguel realized that no amount of wealth or charm could take away what he and Beatrice shared. As they rode on, her presence steadied him, and the knot in his chest began to loosen. Renato, a successful lawyer who seemed far too interested in Beatrice, watched Miguel struggling with the horse and didn't miss the chance to mock him. "First time, mate?" he asked, a smirk barely hiding the sarcasm. Before Miguel could respond, Renato continued, "Well, not everyone's cut out for this kind of thing. But don't worry, I'm sure you'll catch on, or maybe not." Beatrice immediately picked up on Miguel's discomfort and stepped in. "Miguel excels at everything he tries, Renato. I'm certain he'll do far better than you're expecting." Her words were comforting, but the damage had already been done. During the ride, Miguel wrestled with the horse, feeling acutely aware of the muffled laughter from Renato and his friends. He felt small, as though every step he'd taken to improve his life was invisible in this setting. When the ride ended, he avoided Beatrice's gaze, pretending to be preoccupied with adjusting the reins. That evening, back in their room, Beatrice noticed his unusual silence. "What's wrong?" she asked, sitting beside him on the bed. "Beatrice, do you ever feel out of place?" He hesitated, then pressed on. "I know you try to bring me into this world, but sometimes I feel like I don't belong in it. Today, with that Renato, it was just another reminder that I'm an outsider here." Beatrice cupped his face gently. "Miguel, you don't have to belong to this world. I don't really belong here either. This place, these people, They don't define who we are. You're so much more than the opinions or glances they throw your way. But what if it never stops? What if there's always someone trying to belittle me, trying to tear us apart? He took a deep breath, fighting to keep the emotion from spilling out. I don't want to be the reason you have to deal with things like that. You don't understand, Miguel. You're not the reason for it. You're the reason none of it matters. I didn't fall in love with the world you might or might not give me. I fell in love with the person you are. She paused, her eyes shining with determination. And about what happened today, if anyone needs to leave my world, it won't be you. It'll be them. Her words renewed Miguel's resolve. He knew their journey would be fraught with challenges, but the certainty of Beatrice's love gave him the strength to face anything. On the final day of the trip, as Renato made another attempt to cozy up to Beatrice, Miguel stepped forward. I hope you've enjoyed your chance to joke around, because from now on, you won't get another. Beatrice is with me, and that's not going to change. Renato opened his mouth to reply but was left speechless. Miguel took Beatrice's hand, and together they walked away, not as a couple trying to prove themselves, but as two people whose strength came from each other. The trip to Bath had been a test of patience and resilience for Miguel, but it marked a turning point in his relationship with Beatrice. Back in London, life returned to its usual rhythm. Yet the days felt lighter now, as Miguel realized something had shifted within him. The challenges hadn't disappeared, but he was beginning to accept that belonging wasn't about where you came from, it was about who you were and who stood by your side. Beatrice remained his greatest source of support. Between long days at the garage, saving for the wedding, and attending night classes in engineering at South Bank University, Miguel's life was exhausting but fulfilling. He relished every detail of what he learned. Beatrice, on her part, went out of her way to encourage him in ways that always surprised him. One evening, while Miguel was buried in a pile of thermodynamics notes, Beatrice appeared with a small gift box. "Open it," she said, her smile brimming with excitement. Inside was a state-of-the-art scientific calculator, something Miguel knew cost far more than he could justify spending in months. He stared at her, astonished. "BIA, this is too much. You didn't have to." "I did," she said firmly. "Because I know you'd never ask for it, but I also know you deserve it. Besides, I want you to have everything you need to chase your dreams." Miguel's chest tightened with emotion as he held the calculator. "You believe in me so much," he said softly. "I do, Miguel." "Always," she replied, wrapping her arms around him. "Because I know you're going to do incredible things." Miguel felt his eyes sting but held back the emotion. "Do you have any idea how much this means to me?" he asked, holding her hand. Beatrice just smiled, the kind of smile she always gave when he tried to put into words something only the heart could truly understand. But, as with everything in their lives, progress came with challenges. One evening during class, Miguel was approached by a fellow student named Oliver, the epitome of a well-bred Londoner, complete with a polished accent and a tone that danced between curiosity and condescension. "So, Miguel," Oliver began during the break, "you fix cars all day and then come here to study theoretical engines at night. Admirable, I must say." Miguel recognized the sarcasm hidden in the compliment but kept his composure. "That's right. I have to make a living while I study." Oliver chuckled, as if Miguel had told a joke. "Fair enough. I like people with initiative. But don't you think this is a bit out of reach? Engineering is, well, a competitive field. And I enjoy a challenge," Miguel replied, his smile calm but unyielding. Later that evening, he shared the encounter with Beatrice, who was visibly upset. How can people be so arrogant? As if hard work isn't something to respect. Miguel simply shrugged. It doesn't matter what they think, BIA. The only opinion that matters to me is yours. Over the following months, Miguel proved to himself and everyone else that he could overcome any obstacle. He began excelling in his classes, delivering projects so impeccable they earned praise from even the toughest professors. Despite occasional jabs from Oliver and a few others, Miguel stayed focused, turning their remarks into fuel to push himself even further. Meanwhile, his relationship with Beatrice only grew stronger. They started planning their wedding in greater detail, opting for a simple ceremony in a small church in the heart of London. Beatrice steadfastly refused financial help from her parents, insisting they would do everything their way. I want our wedding to be a celebration of who we are, not who they expect us to be, she explained. One crisp autumn evening, as they strolled across Tower Bridge, Beatrice asked, Miguel, have you ever thought about what you want beyond engineering? He smiled, shoving his hands into his coat pockets. Of course. I want to build something. Not just engines, but a life with you. I want to have a home that's ours, a place where we can grow together. I want you to be proud of me, not just as your husband, but as someone who made a difference. I already am proud of you, she said, stopping to look into his eyes. You don't need to build anything for me. You just need to be with me. Miguel cupped her face in his hands, the soft yellow glow of the bridge lights reflecting in the tears that welled in his eyes. I'll never stop trying, BIA. Because you're the person who made me believe I could be more than I ever thought possible. The bells of St. Paul's rang faintly in the distance as Miguel and Beatrice walked hand in hand through Westminster. They had just left the small church where they planned to hold their ceremony. Miguel gazed at the colorful stained glass with a modest smile. It's perfect. Simple, but full of meaning. Beatrice nodded. I've always imagined something like this. A place where what matters isn't the decor, but the people. She squeezed his hand as if to affirm that the decision was as much theirs as the love they shared. Planning the wedding was a blend of joy and challenge. Beatrice wanted a modest yet special celebration, while Miguel was determined to contribute as much as he could, even with his limited resources. I don't want this to be a burden for you, he'd say. This is our day. Let's make it our way. But our way wasn't a concept everyone embraced. Beatrice's family, still resentful of the union, insisted on a grander affair. Beatrice, a small ceremony in a modest church isn't what people expect from someone in our family, her mother said, blending disappointment with arrogance. Think about appearances. I am thinking, Beatrice replied firmly. And I don't care what people expect. This wedding isn't about appearances, Mum. It's about love. The pressure, however, was relentless. One day, Beatrice's father, Armando, made an unannounced visit to the garage where Miguel worked. He arrived in a gleaming Aston Martin, a car so out of place among the modest vehicles in the workshop that it might as well have been from another planet. Miguel watched as Armando stepped out with measured strides, the sound of his expensive shoes clicking against the concrete floor. Miguel set down his tools, wiping his hands on a cloth as Armando approached. To what do I owe the pleasure, Mr. Almeida? Miguel asked, his voice steady despite the tension. Armando looked around disdainfully before fixing his gaze on Miguel. Pleasure is hardly the word I'd use, he said coldly. I came to talk. Good morning, Miguel, Armando began, his tone carrying the formality of a man addressing an underling. I trust I'm not interrupting. "It's all right, Mr. Almeida," Miguel replied, wiping his all-stained hands on the cloth he always kept in his pocket. Armando glanced around, his eyes sweeping over the modest workshop as if evaluating its worth, before fixing his gaze back on Miguel. "I'd like to make you an offer. Beatriz is being stubborn, refusing to accept my help. But that doesn't mean you have to follow suit. I can cover the entire cost of the wedding, including a more appropriate venue." Miguel felt his jaw tighten. He knew this wasn't a gesture of goodwill. Accepting it would mean admitting he couldn't provide for Beatriz in the way her family thought she deserved. Taking a deep breath, he replied, "I appreciate the offer, sir. But Beatriz and I have already decided how we want our wedding. It'll be small, but it'll be ours." Armando smiled, but it was a cold, calculated expression. "You have much to learn about how the world works, young man. I hope it doesn't take you too long to realize that." As Armando walked back to his car, Miguel felt a heaviness in his chest. The conversation was another stark reminder that, to many, he was still just the mechanic, daring to dream too big. As the big day approached, preparations became a dance between aspirations and practical limitations. Beatriz insisted on making the invitations by hand, carefully writing each name with an elegance that mesmerized Miguel. "You know, we could just have them printed," he said, watching her as she worked. "I know," she replied, not looking up from the paper. "But I like imagining each person who'll be there celebrating with us. It makes it more personal." Miguel took charge of arranging the flowers. He found a small flower shop in Covent Garden, where an elderly woman helped him pick simple arrangements of lavender and white roses. When he mentioned they were for his wedding, she smiled warmly. "You must be a lucky man," she said. "Lavender symbolizes devotion. It's perfect." Every detail carried meaning, and with each choice, Miguel felt the weight of responsibility alongside the joy of creating something special with Beatriz. Their plans were simple, but love infused every decision. The evening before the wedding, they met at the church for a final rehearsal. As they walked down the empty aisle together, Beatriz turned to Miguel and said, "Tomorrow, this all becomes real. Are you ready?" Miguel took her hands, his eyes reflecting the soft light from the stained glass windows. "I've been ready since the day I met you, BIA." In that moment, they knew that despite all the challenges, the love they shared was stronger than any obstacle. The soft sound of the organ filled the small church in Westminster as the first guests began to take their seats. Miguel stood near the altar, nervously adjusting his tie, exchanging shy smiles with relatives who had traveled from his hometown. His mother, sitting in the front row, had tears of pride glistening in her eyes, while his younger brothers cracked jokes to ease the tension. "Miguel, you look more nervous than that time you fell off the roof trying to grab the kite," joked Jose, the middle brother, giving him a playful pat on the shoulder. The memory brought a smile, and for a moment, Miguel felt a bit more at ease. But the calm didn't last long. On the opposite side of the church, Beatriz's friends began arriving, their elegant attire and hushed conversations contrasting starkly with the warmth of Miguel's family. Their occasional glances, curious or judgmental, didn't escape his notice. One of Beatriz's friends, Charlotte, approached him with a polished smile. "So, you're the groom," she said, her tone casual but tinged with subtle condescension. "Beatriz speaks very highly of you. It's so lovely to see someone, how should I put it, so dedicated." Miguel maintained his composure. "Thank you, Charlotte. Beatriz is an incredible person. I'm very lucky to have her in my life." His straightforward response seemed to catch her off guard, and she mumbled something about the beauty of the ceremony before retreating. As more guests arrived, Miguel noticed Armando standing in a corner, engrossed in conversation with a group of businessmen. Armando had barely acknowledged him upon arriving, offering only a curt nod. Miguel took a deep breath and decided to let it go. He realized he would likely never earn Armando's approval, and on this day, it finally stopped mattering. For Miguel, the only thing that truly mattered was waiting at the end of the aisle, Beatriz, and the life they were about to start together. "Good morning, young man," said Beatriz's great-aunt, a warm smile radiating kindness as she clasped Miguel's hands in hers. "You know, my family has a rather peculiar way of judging people. But I've witnessed many marriages in my time, and I can tell that you truly love my niece. That's all that matters." Miguel felt a lump in his throat. "Thank you," he replied sincerely. "It means a great deal to hear that." As the church bell rang, signaling that the moment was near, Miguel glanced around. He saw the blending of his world with Beatriz's, a union full of subtle tensions but also hope. What came next would be the most important moment of his life, and he was ready. The opening notes of the wedding march filled the church, and Miguel turned towards the entrance. There stood Beatriz, in a simple yet stunning dress, walking down the aisle with a smile so radiant it seemed to light up the room. Miguel's heart raced, and his eyes brimmed with tears. She embodied everything he loved: authenticity, strength, and a beauty that came from within. As Beatriz approached, Miguel barely noticed the guests around him, not Armando's icy stare, nor the whispered remarks of her friends, nor even the stifled chuckles of those who still doubted their union. In that moment, nothing else existed but her. When Beatriz reached the altar, she took Miguel's hand and whispered, "We're in this together. Always." The ceremony began, with the priest's voice steady and serene, but Miguel felt a weight in his chest, a need to speak, to release the words he'd been carrying since the beginning of their journey. When it was time for the vows, he took a deep breath, holding Beatriz's hand tightly, and began. "Beatriz," he started, his voice trembling slightly, "when I met you, I thought you were a dream beyond my reach. Not because of where you came from or who your family is, but because you saw me in a way no one else ever has. You looked at me, not as a mechanic, or a simple man, but as someone worthy of love." He paused, glancing at the congregation. He knew this was his moment to face all the skeptical and judgmental eyes. "Throughout our journey here, I've heard many things about myself. That I'm not good enough, that I don't have what it takes to be by your side. And, for a while, I believed it. But, Beatriz, you showed me that a person's worth isn't measured by how much they own, but by how they choose to love and fight." The church fell silent. Even Armando, arms crossed, appeared to be listening intently. Miguel's voice grew stronger as he continued. "Today, I want to say to everyone here that I am grateful. Grateful for the challenges, the looks, even the criticisms. Because they made me realize that the love we share is stronger than any opinion. And, Beatriz, I promise to spend the rest of my life proving that love, dedication, and respect are all we need to build our future together." His words hung in the air, heavy with emotion and conviction. Beatriz, tears streaming down her face, replied simply, "And I choose you, today and always." The guests erupted into applause, a mixture of surprise and heartfelt emotion. Even Beatriz's great-aunt discreetly wiped away a tear. What Miguel had feared most, this moment of scrutiny, had become a testament to the strength of their love. The golden light of the afternoon filtered through the stained glass windows as guests began to leave, murmuring about the ceremony they had just witnessed. Miguel and Beatriz lingered at the altar, caught in a quiet bubble of happiness and relief. For a few moments, the world seemed to disappear, leaving only the two of them and the certainty that they had overcome something far greater than they had anticipated. When they finally stepped into the churchyard, camera flashes from Beatrice's friends mingled with the laughter of Miguel's younger cousins, who darted playfully around the couple. Miguel's mother approached, cradling his face with both hands. "I'm so proud of you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Your father would be, too." Miguel smiled, his chest swelling with warmth. "I only got this far because of what he taught me," he replied. Nearby, Beatrice spoke with her great-aunt, who still seemed deeply moved. "You made the right choice, my dear," the elderly woman said, squeezing her hand. "The world needs more loves like yours, built with courage." Beatrice glanced towards Miguel, who was now crouching down to speak to one of his nephews, laughter lighting up his face. Her own heart swelled with pride and peace. She turned back to her aunt and said softly, "It's the best choice I've ever made." But not everyone shared the same enthusiasm. Armando Almeida stood at a distance, his expression still stiff. When Miguel approached, extending his hand in a gesture of peace, the older man hesitated for a moment before finally shaking it. "You gave a good speech, young man," he admitted begrudgingly. "But speeches are easy. Let's see if you can keep your promises." Miguel didn't respond with words. Instead, he returned the handshake with quiet resolve, his firm grip making it clear that he was ready to prove himself every single day. Later, at the reception in a modestly decorated hall adorned with the flowers Miguel had chosen, the couple finally found a moment of rest. Sitting together, they watched as friends and family danced and laughed, the divide between their two worlds seeming smaller than ever. "Look at this," Beatrice said, leaning her head on Miguel's shoulder. "If someone had told me it would be like this, I wouldn't have believed them." "Neither would I," he replied, gently stroking her hand. "But this is just the beginning, BIA. We have so much more to build, an entire lifetime ahead of us." She smiled. "And we'll do it all together. Always together." In that moment, Miguel realized his life had changed forever. He was no longer just the humble boy from the village, nor the mechanic trying to fit into a world that wasn't his. He was a man who had found strength in love and had built a future alongside someone who believed in him without hesitation. Miguel's transformation wasn't just in his achievements, but in the certainty that, no matter the challenges, he and Beatrice were ready to face them side by side. As laughter and the clinking of glasses filled the hall, they took their first steps into a new journey, built on a love so genuine and resilient that nothing could shake it. As Miguel and Beatrice began their life as husband and wife, it wasn't with promises of perfection, but with the knowledge that true love was made of strength, resilience, and daily choices to stay together. The world around them would continue to present obstacles, but those challenges now seemed insignificant compared to the bond they had cultivated. As they left the reception to embark on their new life, Miguel looked at Beatrice and said, "If this is just the beginning, I can't wait to see what comes next." Beatrice smiled, intertwining her fingers with his. "Whatever comes next will be amazing because we'll face it together." And with that, they departed, ready to face the world with love, courage, and the unshakable certainty that together, they could overcome anything. If this story touched your heart and reminded you how love and courage can overcome any obstacle, share it with your friends and let us know your thoughts in the comments. What moment moved you the most? And if you believe in the power of heartfelt stories, keep exploring. Follow us for more inspiring narratives about people who, like Miguel and Beatrice, find strength in true love. Remember, together, we can turn every challenge into a new beginning.